I bought a modest house with my retirement savings, but my controlling neighbor refused to accept it was outside the HOA boundaries. She stormed onto my property, screaming that my house still belonged under their rules and even threatened to seize it by force. She had no idea I'd already installed cameras everywhere. When I finally exposed her in court, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought buying my dream house at 65 would turn into a nightmare. After 43 years of working construction, saving every penny I could, I finally had enough to buy a small place where I could spend my golden years in peace. The house wasn't much to look at, a modest 2-bedroom ranch on Maple Street, but it was mine. $185,000 of my retirement savings, but worth every cent for the freedom it represented. The realtor had been clear about one thing. The house was outside the boundaries of any homeowners association. That was actually one of the selling points for me. I'd heard too many horror stories about HOAs from my buddies. Fees, rules, people telling you what color you could paint your mailbox. At my age, I just wanted to tend my small garden, maybe fix up the garage, and enjoy the quiet. I should have known it was too good to be true. The moving truck had barely pulled away when she appeared. I was standing in my driveway, taking in the sight of my new home, when I heard the sharp click of heels on pavement. A woman in her 50s was marching toward me with the kind of purposeful stride that meant trouble. She had perfectly styled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and carried a thick folder clutched against her chest like a weapon. "Excuse me?" she called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Are you the new owner?" I turned, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Yes, ma'am. Kenneth Miller. Just moved in today." She stopped about 3 feet away, looking me up and down with the kind of expression you'd give a stray dog that wandered onto your property. "I'm Claire Whitman, president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your property immediately." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake." My realtor was very clear that this house isn't part of any HOA. Claire's lips curved into what might have been a smile if it had reached her eyes. "I'm afraid your realtor was mistaken. This entire street falls under our jurisdiction." She opened her folder and pulled out what looked like an official document. "According to our updated boundaries, your property is absolutely within our community guidelines." I stared at the paper she thrust toward me. It was covered in legal jargon and had official-looking seals, but something about it felt off. The corners were too crisp, the printing too fresh. Updated boundaries? The association expanded our coverage area 6 months ago to include previously unincorporated properties. Your house, unfortunately for you, falls under our authority now. Her tone suggested this was anything but unfortunate from her perspective. "But I already bought the house," I said, feeling that familiar knot forming in my stomach that I remembered from dealing with difficult supervisors on construction sites. "The sale was completed based on it being outside any HOA." Claire shrugged, adjusting her sunglasses. "That's between you and your realtor. What matters now is compliance with our community standards." She pulled out another sheet of paper. "I've already documented several violations that need immediate attention." My mouth went dry. "Violations? I just moved in this morning. Your grass is 0.7 inches above the permitted height of 2 inches. Your mailbox is the wrong shade of black. It needs to be midnight black, not charcoal. And that pickup truck," she gestured dismissively at my 15-year-old Ford. "Commercial vehicles aren't permitted in driveways overnight." I felt heat rising in my chest. "Ma'am, that's my personal truck. I've driven it for 10 years. It has ladder racks and tool storage. That makes it commercial." Her voice had taken on a lecturing tone, like she was explaining something obvious to a slow child. "All of these violations carry fines. Grass height violation is $50 per day until corrected. Mailbox noncompliance is $75. Commercial vehicle violation is $100 per night." $225? I couldn't hide the shock in my voice. "For grass and a mailbox?" "Welcome to Maple Grove," Claire said, her smile now definitely not reaching her eyes. "We maintain property values here. I'll expect payment within 7 business days along with correction of all violations. Future violations will result in liens against your property." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Kenneth, don't think about fighting this. I've been managing this community for 15 years. I know every legal avenue, every loophole, every way to make life difficult for residents who don't appreciate what we're trying to accomplish here." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. As I watched her walk away, heels clicking against the pavement with military precision, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine fear. Not the kind of fear you get from a dangerous situation, but the deep, gnawing anxiety that comes from realizing you might be trapped. That evening, as I sat in my kitchen surrounded by unpacked boxes, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire Whitman was more than just an overzealous HOA president. The way she'd looked at my house, the casual mention of legal knowledge, the threat disguised as friendly advice, it all felt calculated, practiced. I pulled out my laptop and started researching home security systems. If Claire was going to be a problem, I wanted to be prepared. Something told me this was just the beginning. By the end of my first week, I realized Claire Whitman wasn't just difficult, she was relentless. The security cameras I'd ordered arrived on Wednesday, and I spent Thursday morning installing them around the property. 4 cameras covering the front yard, driveway, back entrance, and side gate. Call it paranoia, but 43 years in construction had taught me to document everything when dealing with problematic people. I was glad I did. Friday morning, I woke up to find a bright orange notice taped to my front door. Violation notice. Unauthorized security installation without HOA approval. Fine. $200. Removal required within 48 hours or additional daily penalties will apply. My hands were shaking as I read it. Security cameras required HOA approval. I grabbed my coffee and checked the footage from the night before. There she was, clear as day, Claire Whitman, walking onto my property at 11:37 p.m., flashlight in hand, examining my newly installed cameras. She'd spent nearly 10 minutes walking around my house, taking photos with her phone. The violation notice was time-stamped 11:52 p.m. I called the number on the notice, getting a voicemail that identified itself as Maple Grove HOA Administrative Office. Claire's voice, professional and cold. Leave your name, property address, and nature of your call. All violations must be addressed within specified time frames. Failure to comply will result in escalated enforcement measures. Escalated enforcement measures. The phrase made my skin crawl. That afternoon, I decided to do some research. If I was dealing with an HOA, there had to be public records, incorporation documents, something that proved its legitimacy. I drove to the county clerk's office and spent 2 hours searching through filed documents. What I found was disturbing. The Maple Grove Homeowners Association had been incorporated 8 years ago, listing Claire Whitman as president, secretary, and treasurer. But the original boundaries covered only 4 streets, none of which included Maple Street. There was no record of any boundary expansion, no updated incorporation documents, nothing that would give the HOA authority over my property. More unsettling was what I found in the real estate records. Over the past 5 years, 7 properties in the surrounding area had been sold at significantly below market value. The buyers were listed under various LLC names, but when I cross-referenced the addresses, they all traced back to a P.O. box registered to C. Whitman. I drove home with a growing sense of unease. What exactly was Claire doing, and how many people had she done it to? The answer came sooner than I expected. Sunday evening, I was grilling a burger on my back patio when I heard voices from the neighboring yard. An elderly woman was talking to someone on her phone, and her distressed tone made me pause. "I don't know what else to do, Sarah. She's saying we owe $8,000 in back fees and assessments. If we don't pay by next Friday, she's filing a lien." $8,000. I set down my spatula and moved closer to the fence. "We've lived here for 12 years, the woman continued. "Never had any HOA fees before. But she's got all these documents, saying we've been in violation for years. Harold's too sick to fight it, and I just can't handle the stress." I knocked gently on the fence. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm Kenneth, your new neighbor. I couldn't help overhearing. Are you having trouble with Claire Whitman, too?" The woman appeared at the fence, 70s, gray hair, worried eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Oh, hello, dear. Yes, that awful woman has been making our lives miserable. I'm Dorothy Henderson. This is about the HOA, isn't it? She's claiming my house is under her authority, too," I said, "but I have reason to believe she's not being truthful about her jurisdiction." Dorothy's face brightened with the first hope I'd seen there. "You mean we might not actually owe all that money?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'm looking into it." "Have you kept copies of all the notices she's given you?" "Oh yes, Harold makes me keep everything. We have boxes of papers from her." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dorothy and Harold, probably lying awake worrying about losing their home after 12 years, about the 7 properties that had sold below market value, about Claire's late-night visit to examine my security cameras. Monday morning brought a new escalation. I woke up to find my garbage cans moved from beside my garage to the middle of my front lawn. A violation notice was zip-tied to one of them. Improper garbage storage. Fine, $150. Repeat offense penalties double. I checked my camera footage immediately. There she was again, Claire, at 2:43 a.m., dragging my garbage cans across my lawn. But this time, she wasn't alone. A man in his 40s was with her, helping move the cans and laughing as they positioned them for maximum visibility from the street. As I watched the footage, something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't just about HOA rules or property values. This was targeted harassment, and Claire had recruited help. I was starting to understand that Claire Whitman had built something far more dangerous than an overzealous homeowners association. She'd created a system of control, backed by official-looking documents and legal threats, designed to intimidate people into compliance or force them out entirely. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd targeted someone who knew how to document everything, who understood that the most important battles were won with evidence, not emotion. Every violation notice, every middle-of-the-night invasion, every threatening conversation, it was all being recorded. Claire thought she was dealing with another frightened retiree she could intimidate into submission. She had no idea she'd picked a fight with someone who was just getting started. The breakthrough came on Tuesday morning when Dorothy Henderson knocked on my door, clutching a manila envelope to her chest like a lifeline. Her husband Harold stood behind her, leaning heavily on a walker, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Kenneth, dear," Dorothy said, her voice trembling with excitement, "we found something. Something important." I invited them into my kitchen, where Dorothy carefully spread out a collection of documents on my table. We were going through all the papers Claire gave us over the years, and Harold noticed something odd about the dates. Harold pointed a shaky finger at one of the documents. "This notice is dated 3 years ago, claiming we owed back fees from 2010. But look at this incorporation seal." I examined the document closely. The seal looked official, but there was something wrong with it. The edges were too clean, the printing too sharp for something that would have been created years earlier. "And this one," Dorothy added, pulling out another paper. "It's supposedly from 2012, but the letterhead design is identical to notices we received last month. Same font, same layout, same everything." A chill ran down my spine as I realized what they were showing me. "You think these documents were all created recently?" "That's exactly what we think," Harold said, his voice gaining strength. "I worked in printing for 35 years before I retired. These weren't made years apart. They were all printed on the same equipment, probably within months of each other." I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the county records I'd researched earlier. "Look at this. The HOA was incorporated 8 years ago, but according to these documents she gave you, she was collecting fees and issuing violations dating back 12 years. Dorothy gasped. "She was collecting money before the HOA even existed." "It gets worse," I said, scrolling through more records. The original incorporation documents list the HOA boundaries as covering Elm Street, Oak Avenue, Pine Road, and Birch Lane. Our street isn't even close to those areas. Harold leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "So when she says she expanded the boundaries, she never legally expanded anything," I finished. "She just started claiming authority over properties that were never part of her HOA." The three of us sat in stunned silence for a moment. Dorothy was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "How many people do you think she's done this to?" I pulled out a notebook where I'd been tracking the properties that had sold below market value. "At least 7 that I can document, maybe more." "This is fraud," Harold said, his anger making his voice stronger than it had been all morning. "Plain and simple fraud." Over the next hour, we went through every document Claire had given the Hendersons. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Backdated notices, forged compliance requirements, fabricated violation histories, all designed to create a paper trail that justified increasingly expensive penalties and fees. "She's been systematically targeting older residents," I realized out loud. "People who might not have the energy or resources to fight back." Dorothy's face hardened. "Well, she picked the wrong group this time." That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I called a private investigator I'd worked with years ago when there had been theft problems on construction sites. Marcus Webb was retired FBI, the kind of guy who could find patterns others missed. "Kenneth Miller," Marcus said when he answered. "Been a while. What kind of trouble are you in now?" "The kind that involves forged documents and systematic fraud," I said. "I need someone who knows how to build a case that'll hold up in court." Now you've got my attention. I spent an hour explaining the situation to Marcus, sending him photos of all the documents Dorothy and Harold had collected, along with the county records showing the HOA's actual boundaries. When I finished, there was a long pause on his end. Kenneth, if what you're telling me is accurate, this woman has been running a sophisticated con game for years. The question is, how deep does it go? What do you mean? I mean, where's all that money going? If she's been collecting fake HOA fees from multiple properties for years, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marcus's question. Where was the money going? I'd seen the properties Claire had purchased through her various LLCs, but that was just the beginning. What else was she doing with the funds she'd collected? The answer came at 3:15 a.m., courtesy of my security cameras. I'd set up motion alerts on my phone, so when the cameras detected movement, I woke up immediately. My heart was pounding as I opened the app, expecting to see Claire making another late-night visit. Instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. 2 people were in my backyard. Claire was there, but she was with a different man this time, not the one who'd helped move my garbage cans. This man was older, wearing what looked like a utility company uniform. They were examining my electrical meter with flashlights, and the man was doing something to the connections. I grabbed my phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? There are people tampering with my electrical meter. I think they're trying to shut off my power. Are you in immediate danger? I looked at the camera feed. Claire and the man were still working on the meter, completely focused on what they were doing. No, but they're on my property without permission, tampering with utility equipment. We're sending a unit. By the time the police arrived 12 minutes later, Claire and her accomplice were gone. But the damage was done. My power had been cut. When the utility company emergency crew arrived an hour later, they found that someone had deliberately damaged the connection in a way that would require expensive repairs. This wasn't an accident, the technician told me as he worked to restore power. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. This kind of damage could have caused a fire if the weather conditions were different. As I stood in my dark kitchen at 4 a.m. waiting for the power to come back on, I realized Claire had just made a critical mistake. She'd escalated from harassment and fraud to property damage, and potentially endangering my safety. But more importantly, she'd done it all in front of my cameras. Marcus called me first thing in the morning. I've been digging into those LLC purchases you mentioned. Kenneth, this is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. How much bigger? I'm looking at a pattern going back 8 years. She's not just collecting fake HOA fees. She's been systematically forcing people to sell their homes below market value, then purchasing them through shell companies. She's accumulated nearly $2 million in real estate assets. $2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. But here's the thing that really concerns me, Marcus continued. Some of these forced sales happened to elderly residents who suddenly had medical emergencies or family crises that required quick cash. I'm starting to wonder if those emergencies were as coincidental as they seemed. The implication hung in the air between us. Claire wasn't just a petty scam artist collecting fake HOA fees. She was running a sophisticated operation designed to systematically steal homes from vulnerable people. And last night, she'd shown she was willing to cross into dangerous territory to protect her empire. Claire discovered the cameras on Thursday morning, and when she did, the careful facade she'd maintained for weeks completely shattered. I was in my garage organizing tools when I heard the screech of tires in my driveway. Through the window, I watched Claire slam her car door with enough force to rattle the windows. But this wasn't the composed, authoritative woman who'd been harassing me for weeks. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was carrying what looked like a crowbar. She marched straight to the camera mounted on my front porch and raised the crowbar above her head. "I know you're watching, you pathetic old fool," she screamed at the camera. "You think you're so clever with your little spy games?" I immediately started recording with my phone while simultaneously calling Marcus Webb. The camera footage would be crucial evidence, but I wanted a backup of everything. Claire swung the crowbar at the camera, missing by inches as she lost her balance. "These are illegal. You can't record people without permission. I'm reporting you to the police." "Marcus," I said quietly into my phone. "She's here, and she's lost it completely. She's trying to destroy the cameras." "Keep recording everything," Marcus replied, Don't go outside. Let her dig her own grave. Claire seemed to hear me talking and spun toward the garage. Get out here, Kenneth. Stop hiding like a coward. When I didn't respond, she started walking around the property, looking for more cameras. Every time she spotted one, she'd scream at it like it was a person. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she yelled at the camera covering my backyard. I've been running this neighborhood for 15 years. I own half these houses. I decide who stays and who goes. My heart pounded as she inadvertently confessed to exactly what Marcus and I had suspected. But she wasn't done. You think those little old people next door are going to help you? Claire laughed, a sound that was more unhinged than amused. They'll be gone by Christmas. I've already got their medical bills from Harold's last hospital stay. Amazing what you can find in people's garbage. A few more financial emergencies and they'll be begging me to buy their house. I felt sick. She'd been going through the Hendersons' garbage, looking for ammunition to use against them. Claire spotted another camera and pointed the crowbar at it like a weapon. And you, Kenneth Miller, construction worker from Buffalo, credit score 712, savings account at First National with $87,000 remaining after your house purchase. You're going to learn what happens to people who don't respect the order I've built here. The fact that she knew my personal financial information sent a chill down my spine. How had she gotten access to that? I've removed 6 families from this area in the past 3 years, she continued, now pacing back and forth in front of the camera. The Johnsons thought they could fight me too. Know where they are now? Assisted living facility, because suddenly their property taxes tripled and Harold Johnson had a convenient heart attack from all the stress. She was confessing to everything, but the way she said it suggested she didn't think anyone would ever be able to use it against her. The Martinez family tried to complain to the county about my authority. Funny how their teenage son suddenly got arrested for drug possession. Of course, when you know the right people in the sheriff's department, these things can be arranged. My hands were trembling as I continued recording. Claire wasn't just running a real estate scam. She was systematically destroying families who got in her way. She stopped in front of the camera again, staring directly into the lens. You want to know how this ends, Kenneth? You're going to pay every penny I demand. You're going to follow every rule I set. And if you don't, you're going to discover that I have friends in very useful places. She raised the crowbar again, this time connecting with the camera housing. Sparks flew, but the camera kept recording. I know judges, Kenneth. I know sheriff's deputies. I know building inspectors and code enforcement officers and social workers. I've been very generous with my community contributions over the years, and people remember generosity. The implications of what she was saying hit me like a truck. She'd been using the money she'd stolen to buy influence with local officials. Your neighbor Dorothy Henderson is about to have a very unfortunate inspection of her property. Turns out there are serious code violations that require immediate correction, expensive corrections. And Harold's medical insurance? Well, let's just say I have friends at the insurance company too. Claire finally succeeded in destroying the camera, pieces of plastic and metal falling to the ground. But she'd been so focused on the obvious cameras that she'd missed the small, nearly invisible one I'd installed in the eaves of my roof. As she walked back to her car, she turned for one final threat. You have 24 hours to remove all remaining cameras and pay the $8,300 you owe in accumulated fines. If you don't, you're going to learn exactly how deep my reach goes in this community. $8,300, the same amount she was demanding from the Hendersons. After her car disappeared down the street, I sat in my garage for 10 minutes, just trying to process what I'd witnessed. Claire wasn't just a petty scam artist or an overzealous HOA president. She was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise, using corruption and intimidation to systematically steal homes and destroy families. But she'd made one crucial mistake. In her rage, she'd revealed the full scope of her operation, and it was all captured on video. Marcus arrived 30 minutes later with a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, professional, with the kind of presence that immediately commanded respect. Kenneth, this is Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, Marcus said. I thought she should see what you've captured. Agent Chen spent an hour reviewing all the camera footage, taking notes and occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Miller, what you've documented here is evidence of a racketeering enterprise. This woman isn't just committing fraud. She's running an organized criminal operation involving corruption of public officials, systematic extortion, and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. What does that mean for people like the Hendersons? I asked. It means they're not just victims of a scam. They're witnesses in a federal case. And if what she said about having corrupt officials in her pocket is true, we're looking at a much larger investigation. Agent Chen packed up her equipment and handed me her card. Don't do anything to provoke her further. We're going to need time to verify her claims about corrupted officials and build a comprehensive case. But Mr. Miller, what you've given us today could help us take down an entire network of corruption. As they left, I realized Claire's 24-hour deadline was ticking. She expected me to capitulate, to join the ranks of frightened neighbors who'd been intimidated into compliance. Instead, I was about to become the witness who brought down her entire empire. But first, I had to survive the next 24 hours. Because if Claire was willing to corrupt officials and arrange arrests to get her way, what would she do to someone who had evidence that could destroy everything she'd built? Claire's 24-hour deadline expired at exactly 3 p.m. on Friday, and her response was swift and terrifying. I was reviewing documents with Agent Chen when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Dorothy Henderson's number, but when I answered, I could barely understand her through the sobbing. Kenneth, they took Harold, she managed between gasps. They said he was a danger to himself. They just came and took him. My blood ran cold. Who took him, Dorothy? Adult Protective Services. They had a court order saying Harold was mentally incompetent and needed immediate intervention. They wouldn't let me see the paperwork properly. They just took him. Agent Chen was already reaching for her phone. What facility? She asked. Sunset Manor, Dorothy whispered. But Kenneth, Harold was fine this morning. We were going over more of Claire's fake documents. He was sharp, alert, helping me organize everything for the FBI. This doesn't make sense. It made perfect sense if you understood how Claire operated. Harold was a key witness with decades of printing experience who could testify about the forged documents. Now he was locked away where he couldn't talk to investigators. Mrs. Henderson, Agent Chen said, taking my phone. This is Agent Chen with the FBI. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't let anyone into your house, don't sign any documents, and don't talk to anyone except Mr. Miller or myself. We're sending protective detail immediately. After hanging up, Agent Chen's face was grim. She's accelerating her timeline. Taking Harold was designed to send 2 messages. She can reach anyone she wants, and she's eliminating witnesses. What about Dorothy? I asked. We're moving her to a safe location tonight. You too, if you'll accept protection. I shook my head. If I disappear now, she wins. Besides, I want to see what she does next. Every move she makes gives us more evidence. Agent Chen looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded. Then we're going to wire your house with federal surveillance equipment. If she tries anything tonight, we'll have her. As FBI technicians installed hidden cameras and microphones throughout my property, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire was planning something bigger than harassment. Harold's removal had been too smooth, too professional. She'd used the system itself as a weapon. The answer came at 11:43 p.m. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when motion sensors triggered alerts on my phone. But this time, it wasn't just Claire. 4 people were approaching my house. Claire, the man who'd helped with the electrical tampering, and 2 others I didn't recognize. One was wearing what looked like a sheriff's deputy uniform. I immediately called the FBI monitoring station Agent Chen had set up. They're here, I whispered into my phone. 4 people, including what looks like a sheriff's deputy. We see them, came the reply. Stay in your bedroom and keep recording with your phone as backup. Through my bedroom window, I watched the group spread out around my property. The deputy went to my front door while Claire and the others positioned themselves at the back and sides of the house. This wasn't random harassment, it was a coordinated operation. The deputy knocked hard on my front door. Sheriff's Department, open up! I stayed silent, continuing to record everything. Kenneth Miller, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of stalking and harassment. Open the door or we'll be forced to enter. Stalking and harassment. Claire had managed to get a corrupt deputy to fabricate charges against me. When I didn't respond, I heard the sound of my back door being forced open. Claire's voice carried clearly through the house. Check his computer. We need to find all the recordings he's made. This is breaking and entering, the deputy said, sounding nervous. If there's no immediate danger— He's been stalking me for weeks, Claire interrupted, recording me without consent, following me, threatening me. The warrant covers seizure of any recording equipment. They were inside my house, searching for evidence to destroy. But what they didn't know was that everything they were saying was being recorded by federal surveillance equipment. Where's his computer? One of the other men asked. Bedroom, probably, Claire replied. And check for external hard drives, backup devices, anything that could store video. I could hear them moving through my house, opening cabinets and drawers. The deputy seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Claire, this feels wrong, he said. Maybe we should wait for him to come home and serve the warrant properly. Deputy Morrison, I've been very generous to your family over the years. Claire's voice was cold, threatening. Your wife's little problem with the insurance company last year, the one that could have resulted in fraud charges, I made that disappear. Your son's college application that needed a little help from the right people, I arranged that too. So Deputy Morrison was one of her corrupted officials. She was calling in favors to frame me for crimes I hadn't committed. Just find the equipment and let's get out of here, Morrison said, his voice strained. Actually, I have a better idea, Claire said. Plant some of the evidence we discussed. The threats, the photographs of me, the harassment materials. Make it look like he's been obsessing over me for months. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just trying to destroy evidence. She was planting false evidence to frame me. I don't know about this, Claire, Morrison said. Planting evidence is— Deputy Morrison. Claire's voice was like ice. Your gambling debts at the casino are currently $47,000. Your wife doesn't know about them, does she? It would be unfortunate if she found out. Along with your supervisor. Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then I heard the sound of items being moved around, drawers being opened and closed. Put the photos in his nightstand, Claire instructed. The printed emails in his desk drawer. Make sure they look like they've been there for weeks. They were systematically planting evidence to make me look like a stalker and harasser. If the FBI hadn't been monitoring everything, I would have been arrested on fabricated charges, and all the real evidence of Claire's crimes would have disappeared. 20 minutes later, they finished their work and left. Deputy Morrison made a show of leaving an official-looking warrant on my kitchen table, even though it was the middle of the night and I supposedly wasn't home. As soon as they were gone, FBI agents swarmed the property. Agent Chen burst through my front door with a team of technicians. Are you all right? She asked. I'm fine, but they planted evidence. Photographs, printed emails, things designed to make me look like I've been stalking Claire. We got everything, Agent Chen said, looking satisfied. Video, audio, documentation of evidence planting. Conspiracy between a corrupt deputy and a criminal organization. Claire Whitman just handed us a federal case on a silver platter. What about Harold and Dorothy? Harold's being released tonight. The court order was signed by a judge who's about to have some very uncomfortable questions to answer about his relationship with Claire Whitman, and Dorothy is safe in federal protection. Agent Chen looked at the warrant Morrison had left behind. This is completely fraudulent. The signature is forged, the case number doesn't exist, and the judge listed died 3 years ago. As FBI technicians carefully documented and removed all the planted evidence, I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Claire had made her final desperate play and failed. But more than that, she'd revealed the full scope of her corruption network. What happens now? I asked. Now we arrest everyone involved, Agent Chen said. Claire, Deputy Morrison, the judge who's been taking bribes, the insurance company employee who's been manipulating claims, the social workers who've been filing false reports. Your case has blown open a corruption network that's been operating for years. As dawn broke over Maple Street, FBI vehicles lined the block. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, watching in amazement as agents executed search warrants and made arrests throughout the community. Claire Whitman's empire was finally crumbling, and everyone would know exactly who had brought it down. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Claire Whitman receive a sentence that would ensure she never hurt another family again. The trial had been a media sensation. Local news stations covered every day of testimony, and the story of the fake HOA president who'd terrorized an entire community spread across the country. But for me, the most satisfying moment wasn't the media attention or the vindication. It was watching the prosecutor methodically present every piece of evidence we'd gathered. Judge Harrison listened gravely as the prosecutor outlined the charges: racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit bribery, filing false documents, obstruction of justice, and criminal impersonation. The evidence was overwhelming. Hours of video footage, forged documents, financial records showing years of illegal activity, and testimony from 17 victims across 4 counties. Mrs. Whitman, Judge Harrison said as Claire stood for sentencing, "In 42 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a systematic and callous abuse of trust. You exploited the natural desire of elderly residents to live in peace, turning their golden years into a nightmare of harassment and financial terror." Claire stood rigid, her lawyer beside her looking defeated. The confident, threatening woman who'd invaded my property and destroyed my cameras was gone. In her place stood someone who looked smaller, older, broken by the weight of her exposed crimes. "The evidence shows that over 8 years, you collected approximately $467,000 in fraudulent HOA fees," the judge continued. "You forced at least 11 families from their homes through systematic harassment and fabricated violations. You corrupted public officials, filed false police reports, and attempted to frame an innocent man for crimes he didn't commit." Agent Chen had told me the full scope of what investigators discovered was staggering. Claire's network included a county judge who'd been signing fraudulent court orders, 3 sheriff's deputies who'd been filing false reports, 2 adult protective services workers who'd been removing elderly residents from their homes based on fabricated claims, and an insurance company employee who'd been denying legitimate claims to create financial pressure on Claire's targets. "Your actions didn't just harm individual families," Judge Harrison said. "You corrupted the very institutions designed to protect vulnerable citizens. The damage you've caused extends far beyond monetary losses." In the victim impact statements, Dorothy Henderson had been particularly powerful. With Harold beside her, fully recovered and sharper than ever after his ordeal, she'd described years of living in fear, never knowing when Claire would appear with new demands or threats. "She made us feel helpless," Dorothy had testified, "like we were prisoners in our own home. We'd lived there for 12 years without any problems, and suddenly we were criminals who owed money we'd never agreed to pay." The Martinez family had testified about their teenage son's arrest on planted drug charges, and how it had nearly destroyed their family before the truth came out. Mr. Johnson had spoken about the stress-induced heart attack that had forced him and his wife into assisted living, leaving them unable to afford the medical care he needed. 17 families, 17 stories of harassment, intimidation, and systematic theft disguised as community management. "Furthermore," Judge Harrison continued, "your attempt to frame Mr. Miller demonstrates a complete disregard for the rule of law. Breaking into his home, planting false evidence, and corrupting a law enforcement officer to execute a fraudulent warrant represents the actions of someone who believes herself above the law." Deputy Morrison had already been sentenced to 6 years in federal prison and stripped of his law enforcement credentials. Judge Patricia Wells, who'd been signing Claire's fraudulent court orders, received 8 years and permanent disbarment. The adult protective services workers got 4 years each, and the insurance company employee received 3 years plus restitution. "Mrs. Whitman, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling $1,243,000. All properties purchased through your fraudulent schemes will be returned to their original owners or their estates." Claire's legs buckled slightly, and her lawyer had to steady her. 15 years. She'd be in her 70s when she got out, if she lived that long. "Additionally," the judge said, "you are permanently banned from holding any position of authority in any homeowners association, property management company, or community organization. You will never again be permitted to exercise power over your neighbors." As the marshals led Claire away, she turned to look at the gallery where I sat with Dorothy and Harold. For just a moment our eyes met. I saw no remorse there, no acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused, just anger and resentment that her victims had dared to fight back. That evening, I sat on my back patio with Dorothy and Harold Henderson, sharing a quiet dinner and watching the sunset over our neighborhood. The same neighborhood where Claire had once reigned through fear and intimidation was now peaceful again. "I still can't believe it's over," Dorothy said, raising her glass of lemonade in a toast. "When she first started demanding money from us, I thought we'd just have to accept it. People like us don't usually win against people like her." "But we did win," Harold said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. And not just for us, for everyone she heard over the years. The FBI had recovered nearly $800,000 from Claire's various accounts, money that would be distributed among her victims. The Hendersons would not only avoid losing their home, but would receive compensation for years of illegal fees. The same was true for every family she'd targeted. More importantly, the corrupt officials who'd enabled her were gone. A new county judge had been appointed, the sheriff's department had undergone a complete ethics review, and Adult Protective Services had implemented new oversight procedures to prevent future abuse. You know what the best part is? I said, looking out over the quiet street where children were playing and neighbors were chatting over fence lines. She thought she was untouchable because she'd bought all the right people, but she never understood that ordinary citizens with cameras and determination could bring down her entire empire. Agent Chen had told me that the case was being used as a training example for other FBI field offices. The techniques Claire had used, exploiting elderly residents, corrupting local officials, using fake legal documents, were apparently more common than anyone realized. There are Claire Whitmans in communities across the country, Agent Chen had explained. People who use official-sounding organizations and legal-looking documents to terrorize their neighbors. Your case is showing other victims that they don't have to just accept it. 3 months after the sentencing, I received a letter from a woman in Oregon who'd read about our case online. She was dealing with a nearly identical situation. A fake HOA president demanding money and threatening elderly residents. She'd started installing cameras and documenting everything, following the example our case had set. "Thank you for showing us that we don't have to be victims," she wrote. "Because of your courage, we're fighting back too." That letter meant more to me than any media coverage or legal victory. Claire Whitman had spent years making people feel powerless, teaching them that resistance was futile. But in the end, she'd learned that even the most sophisticated criminal enterprise could be brought down by ordinary people who refused to accept injustice. As I write this, I've been living peacefully in my dream house for over a year. My grass is whatever height I want it to be. My mailbox is the color I chose. My pickup truck sits in my driveway every night, and nobody bothers me about it. Dorothy and Harold are thriving next door, their medical bills covered by the restitution they received, and their stress-related health problems improving every day. The other families on our street have returned to the quiet, friendly community they'd been before Claire's reign of terror. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd just paid her demands that first day. If I'd cut my grass to exactly 2 inches, repainted my mailbox midnight black, and handed over $225 without question, Claire would still be out there, still terrorizing families, still destroying lives one fraudulent violation at a time. Instead, she's spending the next 15 years thinking about the construction worker who refused to be intimidated, the elderly couple who kept every document, and the FBI agent who believed their story enough to take down an entire network of corruption. Justice isn't always swift, and it's not always certain. But sometimes when ordinary people decide they've had enough and refuse to be victims, it arrives with the full weight of the federal government behind it. And that, I've learned, is a beautiful thing to witness.